Welcome to the show. Well, tonight, calls on the Prime Minister to toughen up and quit the International Criminal Court if it does issue arrest warrants against Israel's Prime Minister. I'll also show you footage exposing exactly what these anti-Israel protests are like, the ones that Anthony Albanese also won't condemn. The intimidation, the hatred, the bullying, the abuse of the police. That's from just one rally in Melbourne on Sunday. Some of that footage is astonishing. I'll talk to the reporter behind it. Also tonight, more pressure on the immigration minister as a freed foreigner is charged with murder. But where is the minister? Is he in witness protection again? Plus, there's something very odd about this smoking ceremony at a domestic violence centre that was promoted so enthusiastically by the ABC today. I have to say also, I'll tell you the silver lining, unbelievably, to what actually is a tragedy. A reassurance, though, that everyone's missing about the turbulence that made a Singapore Airlines flight suddenly drop 110 metres, causing one death and severe injuries. But I do hope what I'm about to show you will reassure you as well. But first, you know, if I didn't look outside, I'd almost believe the crowing from the ABC and the Albanese government. They're so happy today because a new CSIRO report claims the opposition's plans for nuclear power are rubbish. Or, as an ABC headline put it, CSIRO skewers case for nuclear energy. And it's true, you know, this report does claim that building a big nuclear power station is twice as expensive as wind and power, backed by some kind of power storage like the Snowy 2.0 pumped hydro scheme, to release stored green power from when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. Now, the CSIRO says, well, a nuclear plant, that's going to cost $8.5 billion and take 15 years to build. All too late to save us, given Labor's plans to force shut all our remaining coal-fired stations by then. And this, of course, is what Chris Bowen, the Manic Climate Change and Energy Minister, jumped on today.
Nuclear will be a very long lead time to build, very slow to build. So nuclear is slow and expensive and is risky when it comes to the reliability of Australia's energy system.
Really? Well, let's look out the window. I mean, metaphorically, look at reality. How can wind and solar with backup cost half of an $8.5 billion nuclear reactor when the cost of just the Snowy 2.0 backup alone has now blown out to $12 billion and is estimated by experts to reach $20 billion once you add transmission wires? And that is, of course, if it ever does get finished, because news today, a machine digging the project's 40 kilometres of tunnels is stuck yet again. The last time was for about a year. Yet Bowen claims that nuclear power, a proven technology used in 32 countries, that's the risky option? I mean, seriously, if you want a power supply that's risky, slow and expensive, as Bowen is whinging about, you check the green hydrogen schemes he is now frantically throwing your money at to keep on our lights. He's frantic because just yesterday, the Australian energy market operator warned that his green revolution is way behind. Not enough wind power, not enough solar, not enough transmission wires. It's all falling backwards. High risk now of blackouts in New South Wales and Victoria. So Bowen, like I say, desperate, has now promised another $2 billion in handouts, $2 billion, to get companies to invest billions more of their own in finding ways to make hydrogen from water with massive wind and solar power, without going broke, of course. That's $2 billion of your money just in incentives for a technology that is really untested at scale, operates nowhere at scale, and almost certainly would take, well, more than 15 years to get working as needed, if it actually does work. But Bowen won't even drop a ban on nuclear power, which we know works, have seen works. None of this makes sense. Now, by the way, there are also reasons to doubt the CSIRO's modelling. For instance, its claim that nuclear power is twice more expensive than wind and solar is based on an assumption that a nuclear power plant would last just 30 years. In fact, new plants in the US are rated to last 80 years. You get a lot more power out of one plant. And what's more, even at $8.5 billion, a nuclear power plant looks almost like peanuts compared to the massive cash being thrown at other green projects that no one can be sure would even work or work as well. And this claim that a nuclear plant would take 15 years to build, well, that's probably true, but only if governments let themselves get tied up by green tape, like so many projects are these days. Where there's a will, there's a way. But it seems again that nuclear is just up against a lot of won't from people who don't want them to work. Now, one of the most interesting activists in this debate is just 17 years old, is Will Shackle, who founded the first youth-led campaign for nuclear energy. It's called Nuclear for Australia. There's a lot of people raving about it, like Dick Smith, and he's given evidence to a Senate committee on nuclear power when he was just 16 years old, as well as appearing on Sunrise, Current Affair, 2GB, 3AW, ABC Radio, here at Sky News, and on the ABC's Q&A. Twice! I suspect the ABC was hoping he'd make a fool of himself, but no luck there at all. Joining me is Will Shackle. Will, thank you so much for your time. Look, the CSIRO saying nuclear power is much more expensive than wind and solar, will take 15 years to save us, too late. Do you believe it? What do you know at 17 that the CSIRO does not know at all?
Well, look, Andrew, a lot of experts are going to canvass all of the limitations of the Gen Cost report. But I think one of the most concerning things that it only takes a 17-year-old to work out that there are major issues with the report. And one that I'll direct your viewers' attention to is something that you mentioned, was the fact that they've incorrectly assumed that a nuclear power plant can last the same amount of time as a solar farm or wind turbine. That is just simply not true. A nuclear power plants are known to last from 60 to 80 years, and with refurbishments can last for over a century. And why that's really important to the economics of nuclear is whilst you've got a nuclear power plant running, you might have to be replacing the same solar turbines, the solar panels, and the wind turbines multiple times. And not only is there a cost related to actually producing those solar panels and those wind turbines, but in addition, there's often an undocumented cost associated with the disposal of those solar panels and wind turbines. Now, I think the bottom line here is this. A computer model drawn up by the CSIRO does not know more than the more than 50 countries around the world which are going to pursue nuclear for the first time and are seriously looking into it, or the 32 countries around the world which already have nuclear power. Ultimately, when people bring up this Gen Cost report, which is full of limitations, it is ultimately a distraction about having a genuine conversation about why nuclear power is still banned here in Australia. We're the only member of the G20 with a ban on nuclear power. And as all of those countries have shown, they know that nuclear power is needed in order to ensure that they're able to reach net zero whilst keeping power prices down and having a reliable grid. So if we are really serious about addressing all of those challenges, we need to have a serious conversation about nuclear power, and looking and basing all of our energy policies on a single report like this with such serious limitations, I think is gravely concerning.
Look, I think you put your finger on an absolute howler in that report. You could have also added, by the way, that the Netherlands, the new government there, has just said we're turning back from these manic global warming policies, renewables. We are going to go for nuclear power as well. Now, Will, it's interesting, like for decades I've been reporting on the global warming, the anti-nuclear hysteria in this country that I think has marinated the Prime Minister and much of the Labor Party. There seems to be a shift now in attitudes to nuclear power. I find it fascinating that someone of your age now is daring to say what people twice your age or three times your age do not yet dare say about nuclear power, that it can work and would be a good idea, and why don't we try it? Have you noticed any change in attitude yourself to nuclear power in this country?
I think there has been a really major change in attitude, and it's because so many people in Australia are concerned about climate change. And if you're concerned about climate change, well, why wouldn't you have nuclear power on the table? It's a zero emissions technology, and it's the only guaranteed path to be able to get us to net zero in Australia. You look at France at the moment, they'd be generating about 100% of their power from low emission sources. They've already done this energy transition. And not only do they have some of the lowest power bills in the world, but they've also got extremely reliable electricity. Now, how have they done that? They haven't done it with a risky 100% renewables only approach like our government is currently trying to invent. What they've done is they've used around 65% nuclear. They were able to deploy around 50 reactors within 15 years. And now they're seen around the world as one of the best countries when it comes to addressing climate change. So that's a big thing. But I think there's a severe disconnect with our politicians where they're still lingering on with this fear-mongering about nuclear power. You even have to look at the Labor Party today, and they're running ads where they've got big AI-generated images of nuclear reactors behind the Sydney Opera House with big mushroom clouds above them. You can look it up on the internet. And it's simply fear-mongering. And what it does, most importantly, is it undermines Australia's trust in Australia's nuclear science capability, which is so concerning. We've got a research reactor 30 kilometres from the Sydney CBD producing life-saving nuclear medicines. And for politicians to basically forget the benefits of nuclear power and pursue ideology over the facts is, I think, really, really concerning.
Pathetic. They may as well imagine, a wind turbine stuck on the sails of the Sydney Opera House, just as unlikely. Will Shackle, thank you so much indeed for your time. Terrific stuff. Anthony Albanese, he just doesn't dare stand on these very ugly anti-Israel mobs on our streets now. And the pressure went on him today to at least call out the disgraceful decision by the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor, a British Muslim, to seek a warrant to arrest Israel's Prime Minister for war crimes, along with leaders of the Hamas terrorist group, as if they were all morally alike. This was all that Albanese would say yesterday.
US President Joe Biden says seeking the arrest warrants of Israeli leaders is outrageous. Do you agree with him?
Well, I don't comment on court processes.
Pathetic. Now, today, Alexander Downer, the foreign minister, who signed us up to the International Criminal Court in 1988, said, look, Australia should now consider withdrawing from it if it does go ahead with these ridiculous warrants. And opposition leader Peter Dutton today would not rule that out.
In the first instance, it needs to make sure that there is moral clarity in our country, and that is to reverse the decision and to put pressure on the ICC to make sure that they reverse this terrible decision. That's the first instance, and then I think the next steps in relation to what you would take beyond that, I'm very open to. I don't rule it out.
But Albanese today still refused to budge. It's like he's crawling for the votes of Muslims here and the kind of people who on Sunday in Melbourne protested again against Israel. This time by trying to crash a peaceful rally against anti-Semitism that was called by Christians and Jews. Now, I've seen reports suggesting that both sides of this protest were as bad as each other and police clashed with both. But that's hiding once again the truth about the anti-Israel protests that Albanese is effectively encouraging with his silence. Now, Avi Yemeni was there. He's a reporter from Rebel News. He's not afraid to go right up to protesters of the hard left and ask them the hard questions, although he is smart enough to do it with a huge bodyguard. And most of what I'll now show you of that anti-Israel protest on Sunday is what he's posted. This is the kind of protest that Anthony Albanese is unleashing or helping to unleash with his refusal to condemn the sort of extremism we're seeing. For instance, many protesters there dressed like Palestinian extremists, faces covered yet again, and they bullied even this woman in a wheelchair, an Israel supporter. She was mobbed by these anti-Israel protesters. One ran off with her Israeli flag, which was later burned. They also tried to push back police horses and abuse the police on them as animals. One even stripped off his shirt to apparently try to physically intimidate Yemeni.
Are you a real man? A real man's in front of you. A real man is in front of you. It's debatable. I'm not, you can't touch me. You can't touch me. I can take on 10 of you. You got no heart. You got no courage. That's why I'm here by myself. In front of thousands of people. Because I'm a symbol of resistance.
Joining me is Avi Yemeni. Avi, great to see you again. Look, you've gone to a lot of these protests. Is what I've just shown here typical of them?
Sadly, firstly, thanks for having me, Andrew. Sadly, I'd say it's usually worse because on a regular week, since October 7, in fact, up until this weekend, there haven't been many police around who are willing or available to deal with the thugs. So usually they would get away with the crimes, the violence, whereas on Sunday you saw police move in quite quickly.
And in fact, they arrested 6 protesters, and what I didn't see reported in the newspapers was all, as I understand it, were from the anti-Israel mob. Not a single protester from the pro-Israel crowd were arrested, and I think that says something about the behaviour. Now, Avi, I've shown before footage of another protest outside Victoria's Parliament, again involving you. You tried to interview a pro-Palestinian extremist who'd already been charged with kidnapping and torture about recent violence at that protest, and here is how he reacted to you.
Mate, I'm gonna get you.
You're gonna what?
I'm gonna get
What are you gonna do?
Leave.
What are you gonna do?
Leave.
What are you gonna do? To
Leave.
Me? What are you gonna
Leave.
do?
Hey, don't touch
What are you gonna
him.
do
You
to me?
came my way. You off. You understand?
What are you gonna do?
Stay out of my space. You came my way.
Stay out of the camera, wait.
I show you? You want me to show you?
You better grab him, mate. Get him. Back off.
Why did you come my way? Why? Why did you come my way? You're filming this,
This is Victoria, mate.
But here is the police reaction to that clear threat to you.
The face of Hamas.
I don't get involved in that.
You probably should, though. He's out on bail for kidnap and torture.
Avi Yemeni, what are you noticing about the policing of these protests and the reporting of them?
Andrew, firstly, tell me what other event, in what world can you go up and act like that violently in front of police? And not only they don't intervene, they tell you, they literally tell you that they witnessed the crime and they just let it happen, and then they tell you that they can't do anything about it. There's no other place that happens. It's like a protected species. In fact, if you go to on the weekend to any pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, let's call them for what they are, protests, and you wave an Israeli flag, you'll get mobbed and then you'll get whisked away and issued a move-on order for your own safety from police. But yeah, it's insane, and the insanity of it all is that once again it's been done with the media's kind of help. The fact that they can even compare these groups, or they're unwilling to really hold them accountable.
I was struck by the fact that the media reporting I saw did not draw a contrast between the two groups, the pro-Israel and the anti-Israel, because it was so stark and I think said so much. What did that difference tell you?
Well, firstly, the idea that I saw the reporting that 6 were arrested and they didn't actually tell us which group they came from. Now, all you had to do, any journalist that was there and was honest, anyone that was there and honest and looked at the two groups, you could see clearly. You look over at one group, they're chanting genocidal slogans. There's not one Australian flag in the crowd, and they're calling for the destruction of Israel, but then also Australia. The other group, on the other hand, gathered, were chanting songs of love, the Australian anthem, and waving Israeli and plenty of Australian flags because they love, you can see, they love Australia, they love Israel, they love Western democracies. They cherish freedom. And any reporting that doesn't highlight that is absolutely dishonest.
Well, I think that's absolutely correct, because I interpret this as not just an attack on Israel, it's an attack on Western civilization and Australia. This involves us too. And I think the mask is being ripped off. It's becoming more and more obvious. And thanks, Avi Yemeni, for your part in making that so obvious by filming it. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Andrew. After
the break, when did I was listening to the ABC this morning. Why is it celebrating a women's shelter training women to drive out spirits with a smoking ceremony? And there's something else that's bizarre about this and hypocritical. And to culture wars, well, I do want to get back to the Prime Minister's refusal to defend the latest attacks on Israel, but first another cultural change, another sort of war against the West, really, and our values, and on reason. The ABC's AM program this morning was so excited. Good news from Armidale in New South Wales.
When a group of Aboriginal women in northeastern New South Wales warned that a local family violence shelter had bad spirits, management took it seriously.
And they sure did take it seriously. They 2 years ago brought in an Aboriginal guide to smoke out these bad spirits, as the shelter boss explained back then.
We've been getting lots of stories about a spirit that's been stuck in the building here.
The smoke will end up up the stairs, through the room, to cleanse the place of, as I said, the evil spirits.
She said they were getting 4 or 5 women a month that were too scared to go in that building because of the spirits stuck in there. So anyway, but apparently that smoking wasn't good enough. Well, so I believe, because I'm not sure whether the spirits came back, but there was a problem, the ABC said this morning, with the bloke that they'd hired back then to do that smoking.
Bringing a man into a women's space had its own issues. So the shelter went through a painstaking year-long consultation process in partnership with Nawater Aboriginal Corporation to develop a women's smoking ceremony.
Are we hearing this correctly? I cannot believe that a women's shelter dealing with domestic violence has the time to spend 1 whole year developing a women's smoking ceremony to drive out spirits that I suppose that Aboriginal bloke, he's supposed to have got rid of already. Who's paying for all this sitting around talking about imaginary spirits? But that's not all. Joining me is Rowan Dean, editor of The Spectator Australia and host of Outsiders on Sky News every Sunday at 9 a.m. Rowan, all this time spent on training women to use Aboriginal magic to chase away spirits, shouldn't this centre have used instead a Christian priest to conduct an exorcism, which it would have done for free, since half the country's Aborigines are in fact Christians? What's more, a survey of this Armidale region showed that there are more than 13,000 local Christians, just 47 pagans, 15 witchcraft believers, would you believe, and only 17 people in the whole shire, male or female, claim to follow Aboriginal traditional religions.
Well, Andrew, you're onto something here. First of all Australians wish to close the gap. That's what we pay a large proportion of our taxes, or Australians pay a lot of money towards closing the gap. But it strikes me here they're trying to close the gap between science and superstition, and that's not a gap that you will ever close. Yes. There's a strange little kind of racist thing here going on, because the ABC reported that there were spirits, but when you actually listen to the video from the woman from the centre, there was one spirit, and he stubbornly refused to go away. Who's to say that this spirit was an Aboriginal spirit? As you say, why? Because if not, would the smoking ceremony work on a non-Aboriginal spirit?
That might actually explain
Ghostbusters or poltergeists or exorcists will work on all sorts of different spirits. But the reason that this spirit stubbornly refused to go is either because the smoking ceremony didn't work first time round, or the smoking ceremony was run by a man and this particular spirit said, that's it, I'm not moving. Now, all of this has its own amusing sides, but more importantly, it has its serious side. You referred to it, the money being paid. So Australians, as I said, pay a lot of money, very generously, towards the welfare of Indigenous Australians, and particularly women. And Indigenous women are the worst victims in Australia of domestic violence. So you've got two very serious issues here. One, Andrew, is the money being paid. Is this really the best use of it? And you've asked that question. I would argue no, it's not. But more importantly, domestic violence is, as I say, an incredibly serious issue, and it has many reasons behind it that people look into: sociological, psychological, criminal behaviour, all sorts of reasons. And for the women of Armidale to being led to believe, particularly the Indigenous women, as they are kind of told in the videos from this particular centre, that the smoking ceremony will have a positive effect, I think is misleading. I might be wrong. Perhaps the smoking ceremony, maybe the domestic violence that they've suffered through and hopefully will never suffer through again, but have suffered through, will somehow the effects of it will be ameliorated through the smoking ceremony. But I think it's a big ask, and I think it belittles not only the seriousness of domestic violence, but I think it also raises huge question marks about whether our money is being wisely spent.
Well, what about the money on the ABC, Rowan? You haven't even addressed that yet. I mean, you've hit the main points, but the ABC here, I ask you, would the ABC have been so supportive of an exorcism than it is of this feminist smoking ceremony, even though, you know, like I say, infinitely more Aborigines are Christian than, you know, a sort of Aboriginal spiritual worshippers? Would the ABC say, oh, it's wonderful, they dragged in Father O'Grady to come in and do a Damien sword exorcism and, you know, we reckon it worked and now they're training women to exercise. I mean, no way would the ABC do that. Why then do they patronise this particular sort of exorcism, a smoking ceremony?
Well, you're right. And if a priest went anywhere near the place, forgive the pun, they would demonise the priest. It would be like Damien from the Omen turning up. And we would hear all sorts of things about how this guy, the exorcist, was probably a pedophile priest, or he was this, or he was that, or whatever. They would demonise the priest, not the demon. But no, if it's a Aboriginal religious ceremony, we're all expected to take it very seriously, including the ABC. Or the Christian religion, no, you mock that, you ridicule that for all it's worth. But other religions, they get the red carpet. They get all their superstitious beliefs are taken at face value.
Well, I wonder whether the ABC realises it's mocking then, or it's doing the dirt on the favourite religion of most Aborigines. So, you know, how racist are they, I ask?
Exactly.
Anthony Albanese refusing to condemn the International Criminal Court after its chief prosecutor said he wanted to charge Israel's Prime Minister alongside Hamas terrorists as a war criminal. How on earth can the Prime Minister justify refusing to have an opinion on something as ludicrous and as explosive as this?
Yeah, it's absolutely disgraceful. And Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong have done everything to it's as if they have some kind of secret agenda to push towards the delegitimization of Israel. Everything they do is always putting Israel metaphorically in the dock. Right from the word go, they changed disputed territories of Judea and Samaria to the occupied territories, therefore immediately accusing Israel of putting Israel in the dock, basically. Were quite happy to vote against our allies at the United Nations to push for recognition, to reward the people who had butchered, murdered, raped, beheaded, tortured Israeli women, men and children only a few months ago, to reward them by granting them at the United Nations a vote that Hamas themselves applauded. So everything Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong have done has pushed towards the delegitimization of Israel. And this is not the final step, but another step along that path. And what Anthony Albanese has done by not doing what Peter Dutton quite correctly and Alexander Downer quite correctly and others have said, if this goes ahead, Australia must pull out of the ICC. I would go further and say Australia should be looking very seriously at whether we belong in the United Nations when they stood there praising the butcher of Tehran and lowering the flag for a man who'd murdered and created misery for millions of Iranians, particularly women. Why we are a party to this mob, I find unbelievable. But for Anthony Albanese to pretend to hide behind the fact of there's a court case underway. Well, A, there isn't a court case underway, but B, it's an international criminal court that has no jurisdiction over Gaza and no jurisdiction over Israel. So it is a show. It is a show trial. It's worthy, if it goes ahead, it's worthy of the Soviet Union at its worst. We should have no part in this. We fund these clowns. The only thing we should be doing is withdrawing our money as fast as possible.
Yes, I don't even think there should be an if about it. Now, if they go ahead, just do it. I mean, how much success has the ICC actually had? How many criminals has it actually brought to book? Very, very, very few. And for it to devote its resources to this case, to Israel, I mean, seriously, it's just sick. Honestly, Rowan Dean, thank you so much indeed for your time. Wow. Anyway, after the break, Channel 9 finally gets serious about claims against the top news executive. And the one reassuring thing about the terrible turbulence on a Singapore Airlines flight that killed one passenger. All that after this. Now, bad news sells, so it may not be surprising that the one silver lining in the Singapore Airlines tragedy has been overlooked by the media. Yet it's something that does answer the one fear I have when flying, as I will be doing again on Friday. This Singapore Airlines plane hit a massive downdraft out of nowhere and dropped 110 metres at once, and just when meals were being served. So bodies and plates were flying everywhere. Now, as I say, it's a tragedy because a 73-year-old British man died of a heart attack and 6 people were critically injured, which isn't really so surprising given what happened there. I mean, 110 metres dropped all at once. Look at the destruction in the cabin afterwards. But this, from a Sky News reporter summing up the event, I don't think is quite right.
Singapore Airlines is regarded highly in the industry, and this is a relatively rare incident, but it is one that may well strike terror in many.
Sky News Britain, by the way, which tends to see the dark things in everything. Joining me is Sophie Ellsworth, media writer for the Australian newspaper. Sophie, thanks for joining us. You've got a media scoop for us that I'll get to in a second. But I'm starting with this, not least because I'm going on a plane soon myself and I'm looking here for reassurance, I guess. But I think I've actually found it. Now, that reporter was saying this event, this the plane dropping 110 metres all at once will make us feel terror. But this actually answers my big fear when there's bad turbulence. Could the wings crack and fall off if it really gets bad? And the answer seems to be no. Keep your seatbelt on and you'll be okay. Reassuring or not?
Well, Andrew, I think it is reassuring, and hopefully you can get on that plane when you head off overseas without too many worries. But you and I both know whenever you encounter turbulence, it's so frightening sometimes, but you never expect it to end badly. So I think it is reassuring to think that despite people getting injured and sadly one man dying, they were able to walk away from this incident, pretty much unscathed. It was pretty frightening vision, but thankfully it ended not as badly as it could have been.
I tell you what, the stewards, what do they call them now? I can't say stewardesses and stewards.
Hostess?
Whatever they're called. Flight attendants. Thank you. Flight attendants. They won't have much trouble getting people to obey their... they won't have much trouble getting people to obey when they say, keep your seatbelt on. Not for another, week before people forget. But anyway, to the story you've been reporting on. Another media company with another alleged scandal. We've had Channel 10 already with Channel 7 go through the ringer, particularly over the Bruce Lehrmann stuff. Now Channel 9. There have been reports of the company's most senior news boss, Darren Wick, left the organisation in March, of course, but following allegations of inappropriate behaviour towards a female staff member. Now, 9 CEO Mike Sneesby has spoken about this today to staff. What did he say?
That's right, Andrew. In an extraordinary email to staff this afternoon, Mr Sneesby came out and urged employees, Andrew, to come forward and report any complaints about inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. Now, this move is clearly trying to flush out any bad behaviour from within the organisation that now looks like it might have a serious problem on its hands.
Well, absolutely correct. So what does this mean for Channel 9, do you think? A head's going to roll over how this departure of Darren Wick was handled?
Well, Andrew, look, there's no doubt senior executives are under pressure over the situation relating to Darren Wick. And the Australian, the paper that I work for, repeatedly asked Channel 9 about his whereabouts in the weeks leading up to his exit. Now, he wasn't at work and we were asking his whereabouts, and we were told he was coming back to the office and there were no talks that he was leaving. Now, this, Andrew, has proven not to be the case. And it seems Mr Sneesby and Nine's Communications Director, Victoria Buchan, are both under incredible pressure over the handling of this fiasco, which, may I say, only came to light after we broke this story at The Australian.
Well, this is all very weird, Sophie, because when you say that, immediately I think, look, so until you broke the story, Channel 9 had not asked staff to come forward and report any complaints about inappropriate behaviour in the workplace. But now that you've broken the story, it has. Have I got that right? Is that correct?
Well, Andrew, it appears that this email from Mr Sneesby today is the catalyst. The catalyst was the situation regarding Darren Wick and the allegations that have been reported. So this has pushed Nine management to do something about it. They have a serious problem and they are a network in damage control.
Well, I think they need to explain why this comes after the story becomes public and not before. But anyway, look, I have to add that Sherry Markson, straight after this show, hang on for that, viewers, because she has got an interview with a woman who we believe is at the centre of some of these allegations, and she's got a story to tell, and you must hear it here after this show. Sophie Ellsworth, thank you so much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it. After the break, look, I've got to ask the question again. Where is this man? Minister for Immigration. He seems to be again in hiding after yet another disaster on his watch. And this time, someone is dead. Immediate viewer feedback. I just got to answer that. One viewer says, look, they've been having to walk, because of all these anti-Israel protests, almost weekly. They've got to walk all the way from the city in Melbourne to their place, I won't say where exactly, in St Kilda Road, because the trams are blocked every single time. I mean, how long is this going to go on for? And another viewer is complaining. I said the aircraft, Singapore Airlines, hit a downdraft, bang, 110 metres, just like that. He said, no, all the reports are that it descended 6,000 feet in 5 minutes. That is true, that's what reports said, but the rest was a controlled, quick descent. I mean, it might have been scary, but it wasn't like, boom, like that, a whole 6,000 feet. Hope that clears it up. Now, has anyone seen this bloke? This is your immigration minister. Sadly, he's gone missing yet again, and no one's seeing any hide nor hair of him. Not a word from this bloke, and the reason, of course, is simple, because yet again there's been an immigration disaster. Unfortunately, this one fatal. Andrew Giles, the Immigration Minister, in January issued a new directive. He said, if non-citizens come before a decision maker charged with a crime, please be more careful before you throw them out of the country, if they've lived in Australia from a very young age. Well, he's talking about someone like Emmanuel Saki, who's now 29, but he came to Australia from Sudan on a humanitarian visa when he was just 12 years old. Unfortunately, Saki since then has proved we were absolute mugs to let him in. He's got a long criminal record, spent jail time a couple of times, including for reckless threats to kill, assaults, choking a person unconscious, and eventually was told, well, out you go, visa cancelled, see you later. But then this Saki appeared before a Deputy President of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal under Giles' new rules. And the Deputy President said, no, actually, you can stay. You've been here so long. Got to give considerable weight to that. Plus, of course, he said there's not a high risk of reoffending. Sadly, Saki has now been charged with murdering a man in Brisbane on Mother's Day. This man. Now, Giles isn't fronting the media to talk about this, but the opposition leader sure is.
As you can read in the judgment, this person would have stayed in the position of having their visa cancelled if the old rules had have applied, not the new ones that Mr Albanese introduced. And Minister Giles needs to front the media today to explain the reasons and why this person was allowed out into the community.
Joining me is the panel, Federal Liberal MP Garth Hamilton and Evelyn Ray, Sky News contributor, farmer, regular commentator on this show. Garth, where is Andrew Giles?
Wherever he is, he's clearly in over his head. I'm sure he's going to pop up next week in question time with a very snide set of answers, all carefully prepared, as how this is somehow someone else's fault. This is Peter Dutton's fault, or this is the fault of the AAT. It's somebody else. That's what he's been doing all the way through every one of his blunders. But let's be very, very clear. The result here, the release of this gentleman, is the explicit desire of the minister. That's exactly what his directive required. And there's only two options here, Andrew. Either Minister Giles accepts that this is what he wanted, or accepts that he is so unable to understand the consequences of his directive that he couldn't foresee this very clear outcome happening. Either way, it's not great. This is a minister who has presided now over multiple failings. This is a very serious one, and this goes right to the heart of the intentions of this government. This isn't an accident, I don't believe, at all. This is exactly what this government was hoping to do, and the consequences are terrible, and it's a very, very sad day.
Well, we don't know about the consequences because we do not know that this man is...
Quite right.
That's for a judge to decide, so we don't know that. But I have to say, Evelyn Ray, what would you like Andrew Giles to front up and explain exactly?
Well, first of all, Andrew, of course he's in hiding. And he's in hiding because there is absolutely no defence for his pitiful actions. You know, this is a perfect example of putting the safety of Australians last, and that is the opposite of what our politicians should be doing for us. I mean, you would be prosecuted for letting loose a dangerous dog on a society, yet these politicians, these magistrates, these judges, all these people in charge who continually let these violent thugs go at our expense suffer absolutely no consequences. So, you know, what I would like him to explain...
Again, I've got to say, we do not know whether this guy is guilty of murder. We know he's charged with murder. We also do know that he's got a criminal record. Well, that seems to be quite serious, and I thought would have disqualified his right to be here. But there you go. Look, the whole thing is quite weird, and I think, Garth, you're right. He has to front up at question time, but I think he'll run dead. He'll say, I cannot comment about a case that's before the courts. I think that'll be his get out there. Honestly. But the Prime Minister, he's still running dead on the Jew hatred that's out there, and we gave some examples of some of the extraordinary scenes on the streets now, and it's getting worse. A bakery in Western Sydney has now baked a Hamas-themed cake for a children's party. That's a cake to celebrate terrorists, a group that's actually banned in Australia as a terrorist group that committed the rapes and beheadings and slaughter on October 7. And the party even had children dressed as Hamas terrorists too, with Hamas decorations. Garth Hamilton, I know it's a trite line, but it is literally true. I cannot recognise the country I grew up in what I'm seeing now. What's happened?
I think I know what's happened, Andrew. The harsh truth is that for a long time, we've been afraid to stand up and say what has been happening, that there has been a significant disconnect in the way that this country has been and the way that this country is becoming, what it's moving towards. This isn't something that happened overnight. You don't just all of a sudden have terrorists being celebrated at a children's birthday party. That's not something that happens by accident. There's been a long, slow march that has happened here, and we've eroded, I think, something very important in Australia. How on earth we could walk past this and let this happen? To become a country where this sort of thing could take place. Honestly, I actually feel terrible for the future of the young kids, what kind of message are they growing up with? What kind of warped messages are they being given? And how on earth, and I was speaking earlier, before I came on your show, I was speaking to a senior Australian Jewish leader, and we were just bemoaning how we got to this point. This isn't the Australia that we grew up in. This isn't what we were proud of. This isn't what my grandparents fought for on foreign soil. We've gone wrong, and I think, Andrew, we've gone way too far.
How have we gone wrong, Evelyn Ray?
Look, I've said it before, Andrew, and I've said it multiple times, but if you want a multicultural society, if you want to import people with fundamental different belief systems to our own, with allegiances to, groups or organizations that our government deems a terrorist organization, then unfortunately, this is the consequence of that. We're going to see these things playing out in our own soil. And there's not a law that the government can pass to stop it. That's the sad reality, because we have to acknowledge the fact that when you import people, you don't just import really nice takeaway foods or spices. You don't just, import someone that you live next to and that trumps everything, but you import ideologies. You import ideas, not just the individual person. And that's what we're seeing playing out. So I think that the problems that we're facing have, like Garth said, have been here for a very long time, because I don't think we've been careful enough with who we're letting into our country and what we're allowing people with fundamental differences get away with for a really long time.
I think that's correct. I think there's been a denial of the fact that you don't import just the person, you import, of course, the cultural assumptions that come with them, for good or for bad, or for just difficult, that's all. Garth, I wonder whether it's just naivety. Well, it is naivety. It struck me ever since I was young and, backpacking when I was 17, all that kind of thing overseas. Australians, and I included myself, very keen to please, to believe the best of people. We are the people who tip most, who are nicest. It seems to always seem to me, nicest to foreigners when we're travelling. We didn't want to offend anyone. We didn't haggle at markets or anything like that. We had big, wide eyes and wanted to embrace. And I think we ignore the fact that people don't always mean the best. They don't always think as you do. They do have different values. And I think we've run the immigration policy in the same way, and the refusal to criticise or to demand assimilation comes from this same sort of too desperate eagerness to please.
I hope we stay with some of those simple, wonderful elements of what it was to be Australia. I hope some of those things stay with us, Andrew, I really do. But yeah, we also have to acknowledge that there are countries out there that don't wish us well, and people who don't believe in the things that we believe in. And sometimes, look, oil and water just don't mix.
I would have thought the penny should have dropped even when John Howard, who was not so naive, set up a Muslim Advisory Council, only to find that what was nearly half the membership were supporters of Hezbollah, which is another terrorist group, this one in Lebanon. Garth Hamilton, Evelyn Ray, thank you both for your time. Well, that's it from me. Coming up now is Sharri Markson, and like I said, she's got an exclusive that I think you'll be very interested in, involving poor Channel 9. Good night.